Welcome to Product Photography. My name is Hannah, and I will be assisted by my chat facilitator today, Caitlin. Caitlin, if you would like to say hi.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we will be covering how to set up, shoot, and then edit product photos. This class is bordering on a beginning to intermediate level, so we will not be going into extreme detail about camera settings, technical aspects, or tools. If you find yourself lost, a recording will be sent out of this program and recommended tutorials will be displayed at the end of class. We will be using Adobe Photoshop to edit photos, but there are some free alternatives such as Photopea if you do not have access to Photoshop at home. Currently, all libraries have a public computer with Adobe Creative Cloud, so you can edit your photos for free at any of our locations with your Plano Public Library card. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome to Product Photography. A brief class overview is we're going to focus on setting up the shot and the supplies that go into it. We will focus a little bit on lighting, one of the most important aspects of your photography. And then we will end the class with editing in Photoshop. Now, Caitlin, before we get started, are there any questions yet?
Not yet.
Okie dokie. So y'all just type your questions in the chat below if you do have any. Okay, some basic supplies. You're going to need a camera, either a DSLR or a smartphone. You're going to need some lighting. We're going to focus on natural versus artificial, 2 versus 3-point lighting, and I recommend getting a diffuser, which we will focus on in further into the presentation. And you're going to need a background to shoot against, so either a white bed sheet, paper, or some other interesting materials. For cameras, you can have either a DSLR or a smartphone. A DSLR is a digital single lens reflex. It's one of those big beefy cameras with those big lenses on there. The pro for these cameras is that they do have a superior photo quality, but the con is they are expensive and they do have some vast learning curves. Another option you have available is smartphones. The pro is that they're easy to use. Most people have a smartphone, but the con is it does lack photo quality. But today, whenever we start editing some photos, I am going to show you some photos I captured with my smartphone and then some photos I captured with my DSLR. So you can at least see that it is possible to produce some quality photos with the smartphone if that's all you have available. Lighting is one of the most important aspects of your photo. You can either use natural lighting, so shooting with sunlight, or artificial lighting, shooting with lamps you have around the house, some softbox lights. As for natural lighting, shoot near windows with diffused light. So diffused light means you have something slightly, not blocking the light altogether, but filtering through it. So if you have some thin curtains or a shower curtain even, that works for a great diffuser. Do not shoot in direct light because you will get some very harsh glares on your product. I recommend you just shoot in a windowsill, somewhere near the light or where it's not directly hitting your product. For artificial lighting, I recommend 2 to 3 point lighting is best. We will focus on that, I think, in the next slide. But try out various lamps in your home. You don't have to have a fancy softbox light setup as the one illustrated with this green screen. You can just use some lamps that you have around your home. I recommend using a diffuser. So, hold up a shower curtain or a thin, window curtain to diffuse that light. But whenever you are looking at the lamps in your home, pay attention to the color that comes off of them. There is a difference between yellow light and blue light. For instance, the lighting in your kitchen is probably a fluorescent light, and it is most likely blue. The lighting on your bedside lamp is most likely going to be yellow, unless you have some LED bulbs in there, in which case those will be blue. Whatever you choose to shoot with, I recommend that you choose the same-ish color temperature. So if you have a lot of yellow lights in your home, shoot just with yellow. If you have a lot of blue, shoot just with blue, because it's going to make editing a lot easier. All right. For background setups, you can have a simple setup at home. You don't need super fancy green screen backgrounds to take a quality photo. This is an example. I had a white bed sheet, which I do highly recommend you actually iron out the sheet before you hang it up, because I did not. And it makes editing a little bit more challenging, but we will show you how to fix that whenever we are editing these photos in a bit. And I recommend try using different materials, different textures to shoot against. So use some stones, some bark, some very, highly textured fabric. It doesn't have to be purely a stark white sheet. I recommend having that in the background overall. But if you have a product, display it on something rough if it's a very smooth product. You're also going to need some lamps or other sources of light. Pictured here, I have a top mount light that I was able to control the color temperature on. And then I have a desk lamp that I was able to control the dimness on. So I just had some tape, a sheet, and some lamps for my setup at home. If you have the room either at home or at an office, you can do a fancy setup with some softbox lights and some butcher paper. Butcher paper is super cheap. I really like using it over any, professional photo backdrop, just because you can kind of hang it up and have it curved on the back to where the background looks seamless. So I like to have a little bit of a curve if I'm using a bed sheet or butcher paper, so you don't have to edit out any angles, shadows, anything like that. Here's another close-up of the setup that I had at Par Library. Just some butcher paper taped up on a wall in front of a table, and you can notice the angle that it's at. There's no seam there, there's no fold, so it looks like a seamless background. Pictured here, I chose 3 different types of materials to shoot this watch against. I tried the white at first, but I wasn't super nuts about it. I wanted something to really show off the color of the watch band. So then I did the green texture on the side. And I'm like, that makes the brown watch band really pop. It complements the gold metal on the watch. And then I found some burlap sack material, and I really enjoyed how rough that looked against the watch, which is very smooth. So it was kind of like, using a contradictory background really complements the piece, I feel. So definitely play around with what you have at home, different materials to shoot against it. It really makes your product pop. All right, so 2 versus 3-point lighting. So 2-point lighting is as described. It's just 2 different sources of light. 3-point lighting, there are 3 different sources of light. I tend to choose 3-point lighting for a lot of my photos, whether I'm photographing, products or people. An example here, the first photo on the left is 1 point. I just had 1 source of light. And while that's good to produce a dramatic photo, I don't want dramatic photos for my products. I want a photo that presents the material in a neutral light. I don't want to distract from it. So I added a second source of light, and as you can see, it really evened the product out. And I don't know if you can see this, but you can usually tell how many sources of light there are in a photo based on how many shadows you can see. So there's 1 shadow right here, 1 shadow right there. Here's an example of 3-point lighting. So I had 1 point right here, very harsh shadows. I had 2 points, still kind of harsh. So I added a third above this binocular set, And I added a diffuser. I think I just put, like a sheet of paper in front of that lamp at home. I will say a word of caution, whatever you use to diffuse your lamps at home. I know bulbs tend to burn a lot hotter than fluorescents. So please be careful whenever you are putting a diffuser near your lamp and keep an eye on it because it could be a fire hazard. This was with the DSLR that I had. 1 point, so you can see very harsh light over here, some shadows over here. 2 point, it's better, but I want to highlight the glass in the front of the binocular set. So I added a third light with the diffuser to soften it, and I felt like it really brought up the light from under the photo and just made it pop. All right, we're already ready for editing. Caitlin, are there any questions about the presentation so far?
No, you're doing great.
Awesome blossom. Escape out of here. Caitlin, can you see Photoshop pulled up?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to start with the cell phone photos because I want to show you guys that you don't need a fancy DSLR camera to take some photos if you're selling something online or showing off your artwork. I will say using a DSLR does make it easier, but we're going to focus on cell phone for now. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to pull up mannequin. Let's see here, open with Photoshop. It is taking its time. All right. So first things first, I'm going to crop this photo because I was shooting on an Android and I was using, as full of a frame as I could, but I really don't like that I caught the front of the box with this shadow right down there. So I'm going to go over to the crop tool over here. If you are completely new to Photoshop, we do have a Photoshop Basics course listed on our, I believe our YouTube page, possibly our blog, Plano Library Learns. If I am correct in that, Caitlin, please correct me if I'm wrong.
You are correct.
Perfect. So in that Photoshop Basics course, we cover some of the basic tools over here, but I'm going to try to describe them as I go. So hopefully we won't lose anybody. So the crop tool is over here. You can hover your mouse over it and it should say, no, it does not say crop tool, but I'm going to click it and let's see here. I'm going to choose a 2:3 ratio. Click and drag, I get this nice grid up in there. I'm going to make it shrink a little bit, make sure my product is in the center. And I'm going to click this little checkbox up there once I am happy with that crop. Perfect. I'm going to select Z as in zombie on my keyboard to zoom in. I'm going to do so by click and dragging to the right to zoom in and to the left to zoom out. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this photo already. I think I got the lighting pretty right the first time, but I do see that there are quite a few wrinkles in the background and a little bit in the foreground. So I'm going to show you guys how to edit those out or lessen them. I'm going to do so by using the clone stamp tool, keyboard shortcut of S as in Sam. So this little guy over here looks like a stamp. And to use the clone stamp tool, it rewrites the pixels directly. So I recommend never editing on the background photo. This is your original photo. Even Photoshop tells you it's a bad idea because it adds a little lock icon. So to circumnavigate this, I'm going to right-click background and I'm going to select duplicate layer. Select OK. And as you can see, I have two identical images. So if I am editing this background copy and I really mess up, I can't back out of it. I'm just gonna delete the layer and start over. Okay, so my little clone stamp tool is super, super tiny right now. I'm going to increase that brush diameter size by using the bracket keys on my keyboard. Use the right bracket key to make it bigger. And I'm going to soften my clone stamp brush to be a little bit softer. I don't want the opacity to be 100% because I want this background to kind of blend together. So I'm going to lessen that to about 60-ish. Okay, with the clone stamp tool, whoops, you're going to have to sample an area that does not have wrinkles, that is near the area with wrinkles, because you want to get a nice healthy sampling. It's essentially like you are dipping your brush into some paint. You're telling Photoshop, I want you to dip in right here and pull paint from right here to cover this area. So I hold Alt on the keyboard with my clone stamp tool selected, hold Alt. It turns into a little bullseye, and I'm going to left click once. I'm going to let go of Alt, and I'm going to click and drag multiple times. As you can see, hopefully you can see this, there is a little cross that appears from where I sampled, and it is anchored to that brush diameter. And that is Photoshop saying, hey, I am selecting from this area. Be sure to resample often, because I'm going to see here, if you don't, it will sample from that little cross, and you might accidentally pick up something you don't intend to. I'm going to hold Control and tap Z as in zombie to undo that. I'm going to resample a little bit closer. Alt left click, and I'm going to paint those wrinkles out. Alt left click. I have a nice soft brush right now, and I'm trying to sample from areas that are the same-ish lighting. So if I sampled from down here, that would be a little too dark for my liking. And let's see, I have a little wrinkle down here, so I'm going to select Alt, left click, and just paint that out using multiple brush strokes. All right, I'm pretty happy with that photo. There's no real color editing that needs to happen on this one. I think we'll focus on color editing in the next photo. Caitlin, are there any questions yet?
No, you're doing great.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next I'm going to work on, go to phone photos, and let's see here. I'm going to do 3-point binoculars. All right. I probably should have taken this photo a little bit further out so that I could crop more effectively, but I'm still going to crop as best I can. So go over here, select crop tool, or C as in cat on your keyboard. And let's see here. I think I will choose, I selected this arrow to make sure it was in landscape mode because I don't think it would look too great in portrait. So let's see here. Zoom in just a little bit, bring that up, try to make sure the piece is in the center of the photo, and select that check mark. All right, so this one is definitely going to be a little bit beefier of an edit because, as you can see, I didn't get the lighting super great, and there's quite a few wrinkles, so definitely iron your sheets before you take photos on them. But I'm going to see if I can salvage this. So I'm going to select the Lasso tool over here, keyboard shortcut of L as in love. And I'm going to select, let me see, I'm going to start over here. And with the Lasso tool, the biggest thing is you want to meet up with your origin point. So you're going to see what I mean. And I'm just doing a rough little sketch right here. I'm clicking, dragging, and I'm going to meet up with my origin point and let go. Then I get this shape, and the shape has little moving lines. Let me see if I can zoom in for you. Those are called dancing ants. I thought that was funny. And it's basically Photoshop saying this area in here will be affected. This area out here will not be affected. So if you noticed, I kind of did a sloppy job selecting this area right here, but that is okay because I can hold Shift while I have the lasso tool selected, and I can add to my selection to get that really nice and crisp. I'm just holding Shift as I am adding to the selection. And it looks like I caught a little bit too much of the binocular set on there, so I'm going to hold minus to take away from that. There we go. So let's see here, I caught a little bit of that metal on there, so I'm going to hold minus. Awesome. So I'm going to show you what this looks like without the process called feathering. I'm going to click on adjustment layers and select brightness and contrast, and the properties will open up. And without feathering, you get this really harsh line right there, which we do not want. So I'm going to undo. I'm going to right click in my selection and do feather. Let's see what 15 pixels looks like. Adjustments, brightness. Let's see there. So it's a much more gradual shift. Let me undo out of that. And actually, I'm going to show you an alternative method. So let's say if I wanted to brighten this entire white area, just draw roughly around. Boop, boop, boop. You don't have to get your shape perfect the first time, because I know drawing with a mouse can be very frustrating. So you just hold plus to add to your selection and hold minus to subtract. So I'm holding minus for this.
So Hannah, we do have a question.
Yes.
For the lasso tool, when you were showing options, someone requested that they said it was kind of hard to see the choices for it.
Sure.
I think what they're referring to is when you click and hold the tool.
Mm-hmm. Like click and hold on the toolbar.
Mm-hmm. So
Yes.
those other choices are polygonal.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Lasso
Yeah.
tool and the magnetic lasso tool.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying that the words brightness or adjustments is hard to see, or
Okay.
what you're having that in reference to.
Okay, awesome. All right, so for the lasso tool, it does come with a subset of tools. If you right click any of these tools over here that have a little triangle in the lower right corner, it will display the subtools. So I usually use the lasso tool and I hand draw my selections. You can also use the polygonal lasso tool, that is a tongue twister, and you can draw with simple clicks of your mouse. That is easier if you're working with objects that have very straight edges. They don't have any curves. It's a good way to start your selection, and then you can use the lasso tool to finish it out. The magnetic lasso tool is a great tool if you are looking for a quick edit. Let me see if I can display that. Let me see here. So I'm just click and dragging very roughly, and Photoshop is trying to do its best to guess where I am intending to select. So if I wanted to go here, it will select that area. I have been using Photoshop for quite a few years, so I tend to prefer the Lasso tool and I just hand draw everything, but definitely explore these two other options to see what works best for your workflow. So let me show you the adjustments layer again. So I'm pretty happy with this selection. It's okay, of this binocular tool. So I have this entire binocular selected, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to select inverse because I don't want to change the lighting on the binocular. I want to change it on this white sheet. So I'm going to select inverse. Awesome. And I'm going to actually, it looks like I missed quite a bit there. So I'm going to add to that real quick. Holding shift. Perfect. And right there. Wonderful. So I selected inverse. So now I have the entire sheet selected. I do not have the binoculars selected. So then I'm going to right click. I'm going to do feather. And I'm going to do 15. Now that I have that soft border applied, I'm going to go back to adjustments over here on the right. I'm going to select brightness and contrast. It looks like a little sun icon with a line through the middle. All right, my dancing ants went away, so that means that Photoshop has registered this white sheet area. And I'm just going to drag that brightness up. Very nice. Okay, that has already lessened a lot of the wrinkles there. So it's a little before and a little bit after. But there's one more trick I want to show you to help get rid of the wrinkles without having to hand paint them out. So down here in my layers panel, there's this little black and white icon. I know it's super hard to see. I'm going to right click that, add mask to selection. So that means I don't have to redraw that entire shape again because that is very time consuming. I'm going to right click background. I'm going to select duplicate layer. Okay. So what we're going to apply here is a filter, and to apply a filter, you typically have to have it on a background layer. Okay, so I'm going to go up here to this top bar here, select filter, blur, Gaussian blur. It will let you do a little preview. I'm going to increase it just a little bit so you can see the carpet fibers. Okay. Select OK. And oh yeah, much better. It softened those carpet or those fabric fibers. Much better. So that is a before. You can see how grainy it is. And that's an after. I just brightened the background, blurred it a little bit to where the focus is on the product itself and not the very wrinkly background I shot against. Okay, let's see here. As for color editing, I will say I was using a yellow light right here. I don't know if you can see that reflected in the binoculars themselves on that metal. And I think I used more of a blue light up here. So I'm going to try and edit out that yellow. That seems a little bit easier. So I'm going to select the lasso tool, keyboard shortcut of L, and I'm going to just draw a rough shape around that metallic part. Right click, feather. Let's do 10. I don't want it to be too broad of a border because whenever you feather stuff, the higher the number you type in this box, the broader the border is going to be and the more faint, which is great in certain aspects, but you don't want your area to bleed into the rest of the photo too much. Select OK. I'm going to go back to adjustments over here. And this time I'm going to choose color balance. It looks like a little, sliding scale or scales of justice. Select that. And I'm going to just take the yellow out. How you do that is on this yellow and blue bar, just move to the right and take that yellow out. I might add a little bit of cyan because I might see a little bit of red in there. And this little eye icon down here on the layers panel, turn it off and on. It's very gradual change, but you can see I did have quite a bit of yellow in that photo before. And now I don't. All right. Any questions on any of those processes so far, Caitlin?
No, you're doing great.
Awesome, thank you. All right, now on to the DSLR photos. Oh, my favorite. So let's go back here. And let's go to the binoculars. And let's see here. Let's do DSLR 3-point. Oh, look at that. Just a little bit of a comparison there. Now, I shot super, super blue on this DSLR. I did not realize, because I wasn't really looking into the eyepiece, into the screen too much, that I was shooting super, super blue. So that is something we are definitely going to edit out. Because the thing is, with product photography, you want to get it as accurate as possible to real life, especially if whatever you may be listing online or showcasing has very specific colors in it, because there's nothing more disappointing than, you buy a watch online, you really love the color and you get it in and it's completely off from the photos, you're disappointed. So whatever color editing you do, or contrast, or saturation, you want to make sure it is as accurate to life as possible, because you don't want to misrepresent your products or your art or anything like that. Let's see here. So I'm actually pretty happy with the crop so far. I don't feel the need to crop it, but let's do some color editing. I'm going to select adjustments over here. I'm going to go back to that color balance, the little scales of justice right there. Left click. And for midtones, because it will automatically open up in midtones, you can also edit the shadows, so the darker parts of your photos, and the highlights, so the brighter parts, the background, the glare on there. I'm going to stick with midtones for now. And I have a specific number in mind whenever I was already editing these photos. I'm going to select and type in -24. Oh, much better. This is a before and after. And you know what? I'm still not happy with the highlights in here, so the very bright parts. So I'm going to select next to tone, highlights, and I'm going to try -28. Much better. This is before, very, very blue, and after. Actually drag that to the right just a little bit, so maybe -24 on there. Before and after, much, much better. For this one, I don't need to edit the background at all, I feel, because it's not a wrinkly sheet. I was using butcher paper that I had taped to the wall at a slight angle. So there's a nice curve there, so it looks like a seamless background. Yeah, no crazy textures, no rips, no tears, no smudges. I'm pretty happy with this as is. Okay. Moving on to the next photo, let's stick with the binoculars for now. And let's see. Let's do this one, because if you are, let's say you're selling stuff online and you want to get a couple of different angles of your pieces. So I'm pretty happy with the crop on this one. Let's just jump straight into some color editing. I'm going to go back to adjustments, color balance, and I'm going to do -24. for the blue to yellow. So I'm adding some yellow in there. And highlights. Let's do -20. Let's see what that looks like. Much better. Before, after. But I will say, somehow I caught some yellow in there. Maybe I was wearing a brighter t-shirt. A word of warning to anyone who is getting into photography, whether you are photographing people or things, be sure whatever you are wearing is neutral to dark. So I recommend just shooting in, you know, if you have a black t-shirt or very dark gray, no bright colors like yellow, orange, lime green, red, anything like that, because if you're taking photos of people, it can reflect in their face if you're shooting close, or the same with shooting product photography. Whatever color you are wearing, it will be reflected on that item because you're probably going to be very close taking photos of your items. So I do want to get rid of that yellow reflection there. So I'm going to select the lasso tool, keyboard shortcut of L as in love. And I'm just going to draw roughly around that shape. Oh, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit because I did catch a little too much of the background. I'm holding Alt and I'm taking away that selection. A quick side note, a product that you might want to invest in if you are getting really into photography is a drawing tablet. I use one in my personal work, and you know, they have brands such as Wacom Huion, XP Pen. Those are the only three that I really know. They make it a lot easier to draw and select very specific and accurate aspects of your photos. And they're also used for illustrations, so that's another a class for another day. But if you're interested in it, I do recommend looking into drawing tablets to help you with your photo editing experience. Okay, so I selected this yellow reflection. I'm gonna right click, I'm gonna feather. This time I'm gonna bring it down to 5 pixels because I wanna make sure it is very in flush with that selection. All right, select adjustments, color balance, and let's see, I'm gonna drag it all the way over here. All right, I feel like the +33 going towards the blue side, I feel like that looks pretty good. Before, after, yes, much better. Zoom out. And the reason I took that out is because looking at this binocular set in real life, there is no yellow right there. So I don't want to, you know, misrepresent my product if I'm selling it online. So I just took that out and it looks more accurate to life. Are there any questions so far?
No, there are not.
All right. Let's move on to, let's see here. Let's do some jewelry slash watch editing. Okay, let's see here. So let's start with this one. This one I shot super dark. I don't know what I was doing, but I can save it. You can save most things in post. It's just if you don't get the lighting right whenever you're shooting, you're just making more work for yourself later. Let's see here. I'm going to select brightness and contrast. Increase that. Very good. There's also an alternative method to increasing the brightness in your photos. You go back to adjustments. You can also select exposure. Drag that exposure scale up. You can play with some other aspects such as, you know, offset and kind of increase the contrast a little bit there, make it look really rich. Let's see. The difference between exposure and brightness is both the exposure and brightness settings act to brighten or darken the exposure of an image, but they do it in a slightly different manner. Exposure has a heavier bias to the highlight tones. So this white, the glaring of the metal, while brightness has no bias and affects all tones equally. So I tend to just use brightness and contrast just because that's what I'm used to, and I'm applying it to the overall photo. But exposure is also a very valid option for you to use. Okay, I do realize that this photo is pretty saturated. The camera that I was using, I think, had a color profile attached to it, which means the camera is guessing what colors look best in this photo, and then it adds a color profile on top of that that accentuates or emphasizes certain colors. It can be very handy. All smartphones do this. DSLRs can do this. You can circumnavigate that by shooting in what's called RAW. I tend to shoot in RAW in all of my photos, but for this course, I just focused on JPEG because that's what most people have available to them. But if I'm selling this watch online, it does not look as orange, I guess. The greens aren't as popping. So to more accurately represent this product, I'm going to go back to adjustments, and I'm going to go down to hue and saturation. Looks like a little rectangle with some lines going through it. And I'm just going to bump that saturation down. Even though I'm sad because the colors are really popping, I want my photo to be as accurate as possible. Bump that down. It's very subtle changes, but I want to show whoever is maybe buying my watch or my jewelry that these are the colors involved, so they will not be disappointed when it arrives. Let's do another watch photo. Let's see here. Let's do this one. Alrighty, this photo was one of my favorites because I was able to get a very up close shot with my DSLR that blurred naturally the background, the foreground right here, and really focused, all of the focus was on the watch face itself. So I really like this photo. Let's see here. I'm going to desaturate just a little bit because the colors are pretty popping, which normally is awesome in photography, but I want to make sure this is an accurate photo. I'm going to go back to adjustments, select hue and saturation, and I'm going to bump that down just a little bit. Very nice. And I do see that there is some fuzz over here that is a little distracting, in my opinion, to this overall photo. So I'm going to be super picky, and I'm going to clone stamp that out. So I'm going to right click this background, because if you remember, we should never edit the background directly. We should always make a copy of it. Duplicate layer. Okay. Keyboard shortcut of S as in Sam. And I'm going to Alt left click. And I'm just going to paint that out slowly. Alt left click. Make it a little bit smaller with that bracket key. Very nice, subtle changes. Alt left click. Just so that isn't too distracting. Very nice. I'm just sampling quite a bit because this background has some light colors, dark colors, and I want it to blend as much as possible. All right, let's see a little before and after. Before, after. Yeah, definitely a little distracting. Ooh, there's a piece of fuzz right here. That's certainly distracting. So I'm gonna clone stamp that out. Increase my brush diameter a little bit. Alt, left click. Even just with one brush stroke, that looks much better. All right. I'd say that watch pick is actually pretty good to go. Just upload it to your site of choice and make a couple bucks. All right, it looks like we have enough time to dip into some painting photography, which in my opinion is one of the most challenging, at least in my experience. But let's say that you have some paintings at home that you would like to sell, and you want to take some photos of them and post it online. So first things first, you may be wondering why I have some twine covering the piece, paint brushes, some stuff interfering with the piece itself. If you are selling artwork online, especially original artwork, some people may love it so much that they would like to take it as their own. And we don't want that to happen. We want to make it as difficult as possible for someone to steal our artwork. So I recommend, if your piece is suited for this, have something interfering with the design. It's kind of like a real life water stamp or watermark. If you have a digital design that you have drawn up all by yourself and you put it online, most people put a watermark on there. So for your real life photos of your pieces, if you don't want to add a watermark digitally, add some twine, add some paint brushes, some burlap sack material, something fun and interesting that complements your piece to where it makes it a little bit harder, or a lot of it harder, for people to plagiarize your artwork. And the reason I say that paintings are super difficult to get photos of is because I just have the worst luck with glares whenever I'm taking pictures of paintings, because paint is usually nice and shiny, or depending on what product you're taking a photo of. If you have some, a vase or, some type of 3D artwork. You notice down here, I have quite a bit of glare, which we're going to try and edit out. So I tried taking photos of this painting dead on with it leaning against the backdrop. The glares were just crazy on that one. So eventually I took a shot a couple of feet up in the air. I was on a chair. Just be careful if you're doing that. And had the lighting in the front, and I tried to lessen the glare that way. So if you're taking photos of artwork, physical artwork, it can be very challenging to reduce the glares. Okay, let's see here. So let's go ahead and crop this first, because I don't want this white background to be in the shot. And crop. It's still in that 3x2 format, which is what I want. Pull that in. I probably should have shot against some larger pieces of fabric, but here we are. Let's see, get this just right. And let's actually pull it in just a little bit more. Okay. Oop, this way. Okay, click that little check mark. So I shot pretty dark in this photo because I wanted to reduce that glare. So I'm going to select adjustments, select that brightness and contrast, little sun, and I'm gonna bump up that brightness. Much better. And I'm going to add a little bit of contrast because, you know, looking at that piece in front of me, I see that the blacks are much darker, they're much inkier. And sometimes you lose that whenever you increase the brightness. Do that. Wonderful. I do see that this is just super nitpicky. I still caught a little bit of that white background in the corner. So I'm gonna duplicate layer that background, clone stamp it out, and I'm gonna bump up the opacity to 100. Oops, clone stamp. There we go. Much, much better. Ah, yes. It's little minor details like that that can really make your photo look professional. Let's see, I do notice that I have a little bit of a color profile attached to this, so I'm just going to play with the color balance. I think I have a little bit of blue in there because this is actually a very nice gold in the piece. So I'm going to add a little bit of yellow and a little bit of red. Oh yes, much better. Definitely look at your art piece repeatedly to make sure you are not adding any colors that aren't there naturally. And for this glare, there's not much I can do about it, but let's see if this works. I'm going to see if I can clone stamp it. Let me see here. Clone stamp. Okay, let's see. Alt left click. Let's see how this turns out. It's a very long process, but lessening the glare would be ideal. I'm just clicking along, resampling, trying to match it up as much as possible. Getting there. I'm just clicking away. And sometimes I notice I went over that little border a little bit too harshly. So I'm going to select the eraser tool, keyboard shortcut of E as an egg. And I'm just going to get real close and erase where I went over the line just a little bit. So a little before, after. I would, you know, continue it all the way down, but that's just a good sample. Before, after. Let's say if I am done with this photo, I go to File, Save As, Save on your computer, and I'm going to click this little drop down, select JPEG, painting complete, there we go. Save, maximum quality, select OK. And if we go there, painting complete, it's done. All right, that leaves us just a few minutes of send any questions you may have. I'm just gonna be messing around in Photoshop for a few minutes, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. See here, a little bit of yellow in there. Select that lasso tool. Right click. Feather 5. Adjustments. Color balance. Push that up. Let's see, actually, I might have some tutorials. Let me double check. Ah, here we are. Let's see. Slideshow. Oops. These are some great resources that you have available to you for free if you have a Plano Public Library card. You will have access to lynda.com. You can access it from the comfort of your own home. And these tutorials are really great for product photography and editing. So if you have your Plano Public Library card, go to lynda.com and you will be able to create playlists. These are all premium video tutorials on a subject of your choosing. They have most software on there, including all of the Adobe Creative Cloud. A second free resource you have available is Book a Librarian. I usually just Google Plano Book a Librarian, fill out the form, and you get a free 30-minute one-on-one session tutorial on a subject of your choosing. We are doing these virtually now, so be at your computer ready for a phone call, and we will contact you within 3 business days of receiving this form and set up a time of your choosing. As long as the subject you are suggesting isn't rocket science, super in-depth, anything like that, we are more than happy to help you. Are there any final questions, Caitlin?
None that I'm seeing, but great job.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, thanks you guys for joining us today. A recording will be sent out of this program later, so if you just want to watch it later at your leisure, please feel free to come to any of our Plano Library locations and use our Adobe computer to practice what you have learned today. All right, that's it for us. Thank you guys.